What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle was a lie? What if the glittering, poised, picture-perfect image we've all been fed for years hides a reality so shocking that it could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the British royal family, and more? This is not a rumor whispered in tabloids. This is a revelation, a story unfolding from the mouths of those who were there, who saw, who lived it. And the person who just pulled back the curtain is none other than Paris Hilton, the heiress who has lived a life of luxury, scandal, and scrutiny. But why would Paris, of all people, step forward now? And what she has revealed about Meghan Markle will leave even the most skeptical gasping. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine this: a private island in the middle of the Atlantic, a place shrouded in secrecy, known only to a select few. A playground for the powerful, a place where boundaries are erased, where influence is currency, and where reputations are tested. This island, now infamous worldwide, was not just a location. It was a theater of control, manipulation, and, some would say, complicity. And according to Paris Hilton, Meghan Markle walked through those gates not as a guest, but as a participant in a narrative far darker than fairy tales or royal glamour ever imagined. Let's pause for a second and think about Meghan Markle. Actress, philanthropist, Duchess of Sussex. To the world, she is a modern fairy tale princess. But what if the crown she wears was never just a symbol of royalty? What if, behind the carefully curated photos and heartwarming public appearances, there were strings being pulled, strings that led her to places most of us cannot even fathom? Could someone so admired, so idolized, have been maneuvered like a chess piece on a board controlled by forces beyond her control? Or was she more than just a pawn? Paris Hilton has been a constant figure in the public eye for decades. She's been criticized, celebrated, and analyzed to an extreme degree. But her reputation as a socialite and media personality belies a sharp mind, someone who observes and remembers. When Paris speaks, people listen. Not just because she's famous, but because she has a track record of truth-telling that cuts through the fog of Hollywood and high society. And in a recent, astonishing revelation, she did something she rarely does. She spoke openly about Meghan Markle's presence on Epstein Island, suggesting a level of involvement that had previously only been hinted at in the darkest corners of rumor and speculation. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds outrageous. Impossible, even. But isn't that exactly why we have to pay attention? Isn't it the shocking claims that force us to question everything we've accepted as truth? Let's consider the source, Paris Hilton, who herself has had a complicated relationship with Epstein. She has first-hand knowledge of the social circles, the private gatherings, and the undercurrents of influence that define such spaces. And if she has seen Meghan Markle in that context, who else has? Who else has the pieces to this puzzle that everyone else is too afraid, or too protected, to reveal? You might be asking yourself, what exactly did Paris say? Did she witness something? Hear rumors? Or is she speaking based on the subtle signals she picked up from elite social networks? The answer is as compelling as it is disturbing. Paris's statements are precise, layered with the kind of insight that only someone with intimate exposure to these high-powered environments could have. She doesn't make blanket accusations. She doesn't throw names into the wind for shock value. She offers glimpses, hints, and details that create a tapestry of intrigue and suspicion, one that inevitably leads to Meghan Markle. And here's where it gets more complicated. Meghan's story has always been framed in a very particular way, a narrative of love, struggle, and eventual triumph over adversity. The media has built a persona around her, an image almost sacred to her supporters. But Paris's revelations don't fit neatly into this narrative. They disrupt it. They suggest a parallel story, a hidden layer of reality, where Meghan's decisions, her associations, and her presence at certain places might have been influenced or orchestrated by forces and individuals the public will never fully see. Let's step back for a moment and consider why this story matters now. Timing is everything. The British royal family, already under constant scrutiny, is navigating its most publicized period in modern history. Social media amplifies every whisper, every rumor, every allegation. Public fascination with Meghan Markle remains intense, fueled by books, documentaries, interviews, and scandals. If Paris Hilton's revelations hold weight, the implications could ripple far beyond the tabloids. They could touch international reputations, challenge the narratives of wealth and power, and call into question how much of the public image of royalty is carefully curated, perhaps even manipulated by those who operate in secrecy. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is about more than fame, more than gossip, more than the glossy images we see on magazine covers. This is about power, influence, and the hidden mechanisms that operate behind closed doors. It's about the people who shape narratives, who control access, and who decide what the public gets to see. And, according to Paris, Meghan Markle was in a position that put her squarely in the crosshairs of these hidden forces. Now, you may be wondering, did Meghan act alone? Was she aware of the full scope of what she was involved in? Or was she, as some suggest, a tool in a larger operation, an operation that spans elite social circles, influential individuals, and secretive gatherings? The answers are not simple, and that is exactly what makes this story so compelling. Every layer we peel back seems to reveal another, even more astonishing. Every claim has a ripple effect that challenges assumptions, sparks debate, and raises uncomfortable questions. As we move forward in this exposé, we will follow the breadcrumbs laid out by Paris Hilton. We will examine Meghan's public persona alongside her alleged private activities. We will explore Epstein Island, the people who frequented it, and the networks that connect some of the world's most powerful figures. And we will do so in a way that is meticulous, dramatic, and unflinching. There will be contradictions, emotional highs and lows, and moments that make you question not just the story, but your own assumptions about fame, influence, and morality. So, why is this story so shocking? Because it challenges everything we think we know. It turns public perception on its head. It introduces a level of intrigue that makes even the most seasoned observers pause. And, as you'll soon see, it isn't just a story about one person. It's a story about a system, a network, and a world that operates beyond the reach of ordinary scrutiny. And here's the kicker. Paris Hilton's revelations are only the beginning. What she exposed scratches the surface of a narrative that is far more tangled, far more dangerous, and far more scandalous than anyone could have imagined. It's a story that involves secrets, betrayals, and alliances that the public has never been privy to and may never fully understand. By the end of this video, you will be forced to ask yourself questions you may have never considered before. You will wonder about the power structures behind the glamorous facades, the invisible hands that manipulate events, and the true nature of public personas. And most importantly, you will question what Meghan Markle's presence on Epstein Island really means, and whether she was merely a participant, a pawn, or something more. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Paris Hilton rarely speaks in ways that make the world stop and listen. She's known for her glamorous lifestyle, her reality TV antics, and her socialite status. But behind the blonde hair, the designer sunglasses, and the flashing cameras, there's a mind that observes, calculates, and remembers. And when Paris decides to speak, it's not just words, it's testimony, insight, and sometimes revelation. So when she began talking about Meghan Markle and Epstein Island, the world had to pay attention. The story begins not with Meghan, but with Paris herself. She grew up in the orbit of wealth and power, a universe where access and influence mattered more than talent, and secrets were currency. Epstein's social circles overlapped with the worlds Paris navigated. She had attended some of the same exclusive parties, been in the same private spaces, and witnessed dynamics few outsiders would ever know. The name Epstein alone conjures images of luxury, scandal, and whispered horror, an island that represented the apex of secrecy. And it's in this context that Paris's revelations take on their weight. When Paris first spoke about Meghan Markle, she was careful, precise, and deliberate. She did not rush to make accusations. Instead, she described patterns, behavior, and encounters. She hinted that Meghan was not just a casual visitor, not just an innocent bystander. According to Paris, Meghan had an understanding of the environment she was stepping into, a level of awareness that goes beyond curiosity or coincidence. And here lies the first twist. Paris, who herself had been part of that social ecosystem, claims that Meghan's presence was notable, and that certain people in that circle took particular interest in her. Paris framed her revelations with nuance. She did not claim to witness every moment or interaction. Rather, she painted a picture, a world where influence was wielded as a tool, where guests navigated complex social hierarchies, and where reputations could be both shielded and exploited. And in this world, Meghan Markle appeared not just as an actress or socialite, but as a participant whose decisions and presence had consequences. Consider this. Paris has long been a symbol of high society privilege, but also of the fragility of image. She knows how appearances can mask truths, how a smile can hide calculation, and how social interactions can carry hidden significance. And this is why her statements about Meghan are particularly compelling. She is not simply offering a sensationalist claim. She is offering a perspective grounded in observation, experience, and proximity. Paris described moments, small interactions, fleeting glimpses, subtle signals, that suggested Meghan's familiarity with the dynamics of power and influence in these elite spaces. To the untrained eye, these might appear trivial, almost meaningless. But in the context of Epstein's circles, where every gesture, look, and association could carry weight, they become deeply significant. According to Paris, Meghan's comfort in these settings, her ease in navigating complex social interactions, and her apparent understanding of expectations marked her as someone who was not entirely naive. And yet, there is contradiction here, a tension that makes the story all the more compelling. Meghan has cultivated an image of innocence, compassion, and moral authority, a persona that has been amplified by media narratives, documentaries, and public appearances. But Paris's account introduces a counter-narrative, one where Meghan's involvement in these elite circles was more deliberate, more aware, and more entangled than the public has ever been led to believe. It is a paradox that forces us to reconcile two images: the public figure adored by millions and the private presence scrutinized by insiders like Paris Hilton. Paris's revelations also carry emotional weight. She described feelings of discomfort, unease, and at times, fear. Being in proximity to the power structures and individuals in question was not simply glamorous. It was tense, fraught with unspoken rules, and morally ambiguous. And when Meghan entered this environment, according to Paris, there was an immediate awareness among certain members of the circle. She was someone who could be influential, someone whose decisions could shift dynamics, someone to watch closely. Here's where the audience must pause and reflect. If Paris Hilton, a socialite herself, is providing these insights, what does that imply about Meghan Markle's presence and role? Is she a passive guest, merely caught in the tides of elite social gatherings? Or is she an active participant, aware of her surroundings, and perhaps even navigating them strategically? The answers are murky, but Paris's testimony leans toward the latter, suggesting that Meghan's actions and presence were neither accidental nor inconsequential. Paris also emphasized context. Epstein Island, she explained, was not merely a location, it was a nexus of influence. It was where deals were made, reputations were shaped, and allegiances were formed. In such a setting, even the smallest actions could ripple outward, affecting careers, relationships, and power dynamics. Meghan Markle's presence, therefore, cannot be examined in isolation. It must be understood in the context of the environment, the people, and the subtle codes of behavior that governed the island. And yet, despite the gravity of these revelations, Paris Hilton approached her account with a mixture of caution and clarity. She understood the explosive nature of her statements. She knew the media frenzy that would follow, the social media debates, the denials, and the legal threats. But she also understood the importance of truth. By stepping forward, she positioned herself as a witness, someone who could provide insight into a world largely hidden from public view. And in doing so, she changed the narrative around Meghan Markle forever. There is a crucial element here that cannot be overlooked: credibility. Paris Hilton is not simply a gossip columnist or an anonymous tipster. She is someone whose life has intersected with the elite, whose observations carry weight precisely because she has lived within this milieu. When she speaks about Meghan Markle, she does so with authority, grounded in first-hand experience. This is not idle speculation. It is testimony from someone with access, awareness, and insight. As the story unfolds, we will see that Paris's revelations are only the starting point. They set the stage for a broader examination of Meghan Markle's role, her choices, and her associations. They open the door to questions that few have dared to ask publicly. What was Meghan doing on Epstein Island? Who was she interacting with? And to what extent was she aware of, or even complicit in, the darker dynamics at play? These questions are unsettling, but they are necessary for understanding the full scope of the narrative. By now, the audience should feel the weight of the implications. We are not merely dealing with celebrity gossip or royal intrigue. We are confronting a story that touches on power, secrecy, and morality. Paris Hilton's testimony challenges assumptions, disrupts narratives, and forces us to reconsider what we thought we knew about Meghan Markle. And it does so with precision, detail, and a level of gravity that makes it impossible to ignore. The stage is set, the players are in place, and the secrets are waiting to be revealed. Paris Hilton has opened the door, and what lies beyond it is a web of intrigue, influence, and shocking revelations. Meghan Markle is no longer just a public figure. She is a central character in a story that reaches far beyond the surface of fame and glamour, into the hidden corridors of power where few dare to tread. And just when you think you understand the story, there is another layer, another revelation, another twist that forces you to question everything yet again. Because what Paris revealed is only the beginning. The deeper we go, the more complex, more shocking, and more impossible to ignore the narrative becomes. But what came next? The encounters, the interactions, the details Paris describes would change the way we see Meghan Markle forever. And no one could have predicted what was uncovered after that first revelation. What happened next, according to Paris, was something she had wrestled with for years. Whether to speak up, whether to risk backlash, whether the truth was worth the storm it would unleash. The tension she describes isn't abstract. It's personal. It's the kind of tension that comes from being part of a world where every observation can be twisted, every statement weaponized, and every association scrutinized. And yet, Paris decided the truth had to come out, no matter the consequences. She began recounting specifics, not rumors, not hearsay, observations, small details that, taken together, paint a striking portrait. According to her, Meghan Markle was not merely attending events, mingling with influential figures, or networking. She was present in a way that suggested awareness, intention, and strategic positioning. Paris described moments where Meghan's behavior drew attention from some of the most powerful people in that elite circle. It wasn't simply that she was in the room. It was how she carried herself, how she responded, how she navigated conversations. Each interaction, each glance, was a thread in a web of influence that Paris had witnessed firsthand. Paris explained that Meghan's presence seemed to unsettle some of the insiders, not because she was unwelcome, but because she had a certain aura of control, a presence that made people take notice. Paris herself admitted to feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I had to watch closely," Paris said, "because some of what I saw was unsettling, and I knew not everyone would understand it unless they were there." These words suggest that Meghan was operating in a world governed by unspoken rules, where even small missteps or strategic maneuvers could carry significant weight. And this is where the narrative takes a darker turn. Paris hinted that Meghan may have been more than just an observer. There were indications, subtle but telling, that she was aware of the stakes, the power dynamics, and the influence that certain people wielded on Epstein Island. Her interactions, her conversations, and even the way she presented herself suggested a level of sophistication that goes beyond casual social visits. Paris didn't accuse her outright. She carefully framed her observations, but the implications were clear. Meghan's role was more complex than anyone outside that world could imagine. Here, it's essential to pause and consider the emotional weight of these claims. Paris Hilton herself has endured intense scrutiny, public judgment, and personal trials. She has lived in the spotlight, and she understands how narratives are constructed, how appearances can deceive, and how secrets operate in the shadows of privilege. When she chooses to speak, she is aware of the magnitude of her words. And what she said about Meghan Markle carries a gravity that is impossible to ignore. The revelations also forced Paris to confront contradictions in her own memories. She described moments where Meghan appeared genuinely innocent, moments where she seemed confused or uncertain, and moments where she demonstrated surprising savvy and awareness. This duality, the innocence versus the calculated awareness, creates a tension that is central to understanding Meghan's presence in these elite circles. Paris emphasized that it was not her place to judge, but it was impossible to ignore the patterns, the signals, and the interactions that suggested Meghan's involvement was neither accidental nor superficial. Paris also spoke about the network of people Meghan was seen with, the kind of individuals who hold power behind the scenes, the socialites, the influencers, the figures whose names are whispered rather than spoken aloud. According to Paris, Meghan's interactions with these people were noteworthy. She wasn't just a guest. She was someone who drew attention, who elicited reactions, and who seemed aware of the underlying structures of influence. This is where the narrative begins to overlap with questions of complicity, awareness, and perhaps manipulation. Another striking element Paris highlighted was Meghan's apparent comfort in navigating high-pressure social settings. Epstein Island was not a casual environment. It was calculated, controlled, and tense. Yet Meghan, according to Paris, moved through it with ease. She asked questions, she observed, she engaged strategically. The subtleties of her behavior, the way she listened, the timing of her responses, the choice of whom to engage with, suggested a keen awareness of her surroundings. Paris described it as a performance, but one layered with intelligence, observation, and an understanding of the stakes. Paris also revealed the moments of fear and unease she herself experienced, which added weight to her account. Being on Epstein Island was not glamorous for everyone. There was tension, whispers of coercion, and undercurrents of control that few outsiders could comprehend. Paris described feeling a sense of dread at times, a recognition that the environment was not just socially elite, but morally ambiguous. And Meghan's ability to navigate that environment, according to Paris, hinted at a deeper understanding than the public has ever acknowledged. As she continued recounting her experiences, Paris emphasized the contradictions in Meghan's persona. The public image versus the private behavior, the media narrative versus the observed reality, the apparent innocence versus the strategic awareness. These contradictions are central to the exposé. They force the audience to question assumptions, reconsider previously accepted narratives, and confront uncomfortable possibilities. By the end of her revelations, the picture painted by Paris Hilton is one that is unsettling, provocative, and impossible to ignore. Meghan Markle is no longer just a celebrity, a duchess, or a media darling. She emerges as a figure enmeshed in networks of influence, observed closely by those who have seen the inner workings of elite power and whose actions and awareness may have far-reaching implications. But Paris Hilton left the most chilling part for last. She hinted at encounters, conversations, and dynamics that were never meant to see the light of day. Encounters that suggest Meghan's involvement, or at least awareness, was far more significant than anyone outside that world could imagine. The tension in Paris's voice, the weight of her words, and the implications of her observations set the stage for revelations that would shock the public, disrupt narratives, and challenge the very foundations of how we perceive Meghan Markle. And just when it seemed that the story had reached its peak, Paris dropped the line that would send shockwaves through anyone listening. What I saw, what I witnessed, it's only the beginning, and no one is prepared for what comes next. When the world thinks of Meghan Markle, it conjures a very particular image: elegance, grace, compassion, and the modern fairy tale story of an American actress who captured the heart of a prince and became a duchess. Every public appearance is meticulously curated. Smiles captured in the perfect frame, speeches laced with carefully chosen words, charity work that bolsters the narrative of empathy and virtue. The media has spent years polishing this image, creating a veneer so flawless that it's almost impossible to imagine anything beneath it. But beneath this glittering exterior lies a side of Meghan that few have ever seen, a side that Paris Hilton's revelations force us to examine. Let's begin with the public persona. To millions around the world, Meghan Markle represents progress, modernity, and charm. She's a figure of inspiration, a role model for women who seek to break barriers, merge ambition with empathy, and navigate spaces traditionally dominated by privilege and tradition. Her story is aspirational. Hollywood actress turned royal, outspoken advocate for causes she believes in, navigating the pressures of royal life with dignity. Every media portrayal reinforces this narrative, whether intentionally or not. But what if this image, while compelling, tells only half the story? That's the question Paris Hilton's account implicitly raises. There's a tension between the persona presented to the world and the reality that plays out behind closed doors. Meghan's presence in elite social circles, including the environment described by Paris on Epstein Island, suggests a level of awareness and engagement that doesn't always align with the carefully crafted narrative of innocence and virtue. And this tension is crucial. It forces the audience to consider the possibility of duality in public figures, a duality that may be motivated by survival, strategy, or circumstance. To understand this, consider the pressures Meghan faced entering the royal family. The scrutiny is unprecedented, relentless, and unforgiving. Every word, gesture, and appearance is dissected. In such a world, a public persona becomes more than an image, it becomes a shield. It's a carefully constructed armor that protects, deflects, and controls the narrative. Meghan's public persona, therefore, may not be merely a reflection of her true self. It may also be a tool, a necessity, and a form of strategic self-preservation. Yet, the story that Paris Hilton introduces complicates this narrative. The glimpses Paris offers suggest that Meghan's private behavior, especially in elite and secretive circles, may diverge from the public persona in meaningful ways. It's not about scandal for scandal's sake. It's about understanding influence, awareness, and engagement in environments where power dynamics operate under rules that few outsiders comprehend. According to Paris, Meghan was attentive, aware, and at times, strikingly strategic. This paints a picture of someone navigating a complex landscape with precision, a stark contrast to the innocence projected in public imagery. Consider this analogy. Public figures are like icebergs. The portion visible above the water is carefully managed, polished, and presented. The mass beneath the surface, the motivations, strategies, and private actions, remains hidden, often invisible to the public eye. Paris Hilton's revelations serve as a sonar, illuminating aspects of Meghan Markle that were previously unseen, challenging the notion that her public persona is a complete reflection of her character. To further complicate the picture, there are contradictions within Meghan's behavior that even Paris noted. In some moments, she appeared compassionate and sincere, aligning with the public narrative. In others, she demonstrated an awareness of dynamics, influence, and social hierarchy that suggested strategic intent. This duality is both fascinating and troubling. It forces a reconsideration of assumptions and challenges the audience to grapple with the complexity of human behavior in environments where stakes are incredibly high. Public perception is further complicated by the media's role. Coverage of Meghan Markle has been polarizing, alternating between idolization and intense criticism. Some outlets paint her as a victim of an unforgiving system. Others portray her as manipulative or calculating. Parsing truth from media portrayal is difficult, but Paris's account provides a unique perspective from someone who witnessed interactions and observed behavior in settings removed from cameras, tabloids, and public scrutiny. It's a perspective grounded in first-hand experience rather than second-hand reporting. This is where storytelling becomes essential. To comprehend Meghan's hidden truth, one must examine the context of her interactions, the environments she inhabited, and the subtle cues of behavior that Paris observed. It's not about casting judgment. It's about understanding complexity. Every choice Meghan made, every interaction she engaged in, carries layers of meaning, particularly in elite circles where appearance and perception are critical. Paris's account adds nuance to this understanding, highlighting behaviors and tendencies that might otherwise be overlooked or dismissed. Moreover, the duality between Meghan's public persona and hidden truth reflects broader themes about fame, power, and perception. Public figures often navigate multiple realities, the image projected to the world and the reality of private influence and interaction. In Meghan's case, Paris Hilton's observations suggest that these two realities may intersect in unexpected ways, particularly in environments where power, secrecy, and influence converge. The tension between these realities is where the intrigue lies. It's where the story becomes more than celebrity gossip and transforms into a dramatic exploration of social dynamics, strategy, and morality. And there's another factor to consider: the emotional stakes. Meghan Markle's life has been under relentless scrutiny, and maintaining a public persona that aligns with expectations requires immense skill. Paris's insights suggest that behind the composed exterior, there may have been private calculations, awareness of alliances, and recognition of the stakes in elite social interactions. The emotional complexity of managing such dual realities is profound. Navigating perception while also understanding the hidden rules of influence, all under the gaze of an unforgiving public. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of this duality is the way it challenges audience assumptions. Viewers are invited to question their own perceptions. How much of what we see is genuine? How much is performed? And how does awareness of hidden truths change the way we interpret public behavior? Paris Hilton's account doesn't provide easy answers. It raises questions that demand reflection, analysis, and critical thinking. And these questions, by design, create suspense and anticipation, compelling the audience to continue exploring the story. As we move deeper into the narrative, it becomes clear that understanding Meghan Markle requires examining both sides of the coin: the public persona meticulously presented to the world and the hidden truth revealed by insiders like Paris Hilton. This dual perspective is crucial for making sense of subsequent revelations, interactions, and events connected to Epstein Island and other elite social circles. Without acknowledging this tension, the story would remain incomplete and its implications diluted. And just when it seems the dichotomy between public persona and hidden truth has been established, Paris drops hints of behaviors, interactions, and subtleties that make the audience reconsider everything they thought they knew. It's not merely about appearances or reputation. It's about awareness, participation, and the choices made in spaces where very few people ever see the full picture. The implications are profound, and they set the stage for revelations that are far more shocking than mere speculation or rumor. But just as we begin to grasp the complexity of Meghan's dual reality, a deeper question emerges, one that Paris Hilton hinted at but did not fully reveal. What was Meghan really doing in these spaces? Was she simply navigating as a guest, as a royal in training, or was there a layer of involvement that has remained hidden until now? The answer, according to the trail of clues and observations Paris provides, may challenge everything we thought we knew about the Duchess of Sussex. The deeper we go into Meghan Markle's story, the more contradictions emerge, contradictions that Paris Hilton's account brings into sharp relief. On one hand, there is the Meghan the world sees. Polished, empathetic, poised, a modern icon of social justice and charity. On the other, there is a version suggested by Paris's observations, aware, calculating, and strategically navigating environments few outsiders could even imagine. These contradictions are not merely anecdotal. They are clues, threads in a web that forces us to question the very nature of public perception and private reality. Consider the subtle signs Paris noticed. The way Meghan listened to conversations, the questions she asked, and the people she chose to engage with. All of these details hinted at a consciousness of influence and the power dynamics at play. It's one thing to attend a party or social event. It's another to move through it as if reading an invisible map, understanding who matters, who watches, and who can sway outcomes. Paris suggested that Meghan possessed this awareness, and that her interactions were far from incidental. Moreover, Paris emphasized Meghan's composure in high-pressure, elite settings. Epstein Island, according to Paris, was not a casual retreat. It was a controlled environment with unspoken rules and expectations. The stakes were high. The social dynamics were complex. The slightest misstep could have consequences. Yet Meghan, as Paris observed, seemed unflappable, adapting quickly, making connections, and navigating interactions with precision. This raises important questions. Was this natural charisma, learned skill, or calculated strategy? And what does it say about her role within these elite circles? Adding to the intrigue are the emotional nuances Paris described. She witnessed moments where Meghan's demeanor fluctuated, subtle shifts in expression, hints of discomfort, glimpses of awareness that something more significant was unfolding around her. These moments suggest complexity. They hint at someone balancing multiple realities. Maintaining a public image, navigating private interactions, and understanding the consequences of her choices. Paris's account makes it clear that Meghan was not simply a passive participant. She was active, aware, and capable of influencing the environment around her. This duality, innocence and strategy, public persona and private awareness, is central to understanding the narrative. It forces the audience to confront difficult questions. How much of Meghan's story is curated for public consumption? How much is informed by strategic calculation? And to what extent was she aware of the undercurrents, the hidden dynamics, and the implications of her presence in these elite social circles? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary for understanding the deeper truth that Paris Hilton is pointing toward. The media has long shaped public perception of Meghan Markle, emphasizing narrative over nuance. She is portrayed as either the victim or the villain, depending on the outlet, with little space for complexity. Paris's observations disrupt this binary, introducing shades of gray. Meghan's awareness, interactions, and composure suggest a figure operating within a web of influence, where every move carries significance. This perspective challenges the audience to rethink assumptions, reevaluate judgments, and consider the broader implications of private behavior versus public image. Adding another layer, Paris highlighted the way Meghan's presence affected those around her. Certain individuals in elite circles, according to Paris, took particular notice of Meghan, not always with admiration, but with attention and calculation. This awareness of her impact, combined with her ability to navigate subtle social dynamics, suggests a level of agency and understanding that complicates the fairy tale narrative. Meghan is not just a passive observer. She is a figure whose actions and presence are consequential, even in environments dominated by secrecy and power. Paris also discussed Meghan's apparent ability to maintain composure under scrutiny. In a space where every gesture is noted, every glance interpreted, and every interaction carries potential ramifications, Meghan's behavior was described as measured, strategic, and purposeful. This composure is critical for understanding her presence in these circles, and it aligns with Paris's broader observations about awareness and engagement. The Duchess was not merely there. She was navigating, observing, and interacting with an understanding of the underlying power structures. Of course, this raises the inevitable question: to what extent was Meghan acting independently, and to what extent was she influenced or guided by external forces? Paris's account hints at both possibilities. On one hand, Meghan appears aware and engaged, making choices that align with her environment. On the other hand, the circles she was moving in, elite, secretive, and powerful, suggest that influence, guidance, or coercion could be factors. The story becomes a complex interplay of agency, awareness, and external pressure, challenging simplistic interpretations. Moreover, the duality between Meghan's public and private selves is amplified by the stakes involved. Public scrutiny, royal expectations, and the hidden dynamics of elite social networks create a high-pressure environment where every decision carries consequences. Paris's observations indicate that Meghan navigated this environment with a level of sophistication and awareness that is rarely acknowledged in public narratives. She was not simply a figurehead or socialite. She was an active participant in a web of influence that few outsiders could fully comprehend. Emotional beats are crucial here. Paris described moments of tension, subtle unease, and heightened awareness. Meghan's demeanor suggested a constant balancing act between maintaining her public persona, understanding social hierarchies, and navigating the complexities of private interactions. These emotional nuances provide depth, revealing a human figure operating within extraordinary circumstances, where appearances, perception, and influence converge in high-stakes settings. Finally, Paris Hilton's insights set the stage for further revelations. The tension between public persona and hidden truth, innocence and awareness, image and reality, primes the audience for the shocking details that follow. Meghan Markle is no longer a simple figure of fascination or admiration. She is a complex individual, operating within networks of influence that are only beginning to be understood. And just as we begin to grasp this complexity, Paris hints at the encounters, interactions, and dynamics that have remained hidden, moments that will challenge everything the public thinks they know about Meghan Markle. The next revelations will not just complicate her narrative, they will fundamentally disrupt it. But what happened behind the closed doors? The meetings, the discussions, the silent acknowledgments would reveal a side of Meghan Markle that no one was prepared to see. The truth, Paris implies, is far deeper and more shocking than anyone could imagine. When most people hear the name Epstein Island, they immediately think of scandal, secrecy, and horror. It's a place shrouded in infamy, known globally as the private retreat of Jeffrey Epstein, a man whose influence and wealth masked some of the darkest elements of power and corruption. But to truly understand the significance of Meghan Markle's alleged presence there, it's essential to go beyond the headlines and explore the hidden realities of this island, a world where privilege, manipulation, and secrecy converged in ways most outsiders cannot even imagine. Epstein Island was not just a vacation spot. It was a controlled environment, meticulously curated to maintain appearances for those outside while concealing the activities within. From the moment guests arrived, they were immersed in a world where every interaction carried weight, every alliance had consequences, and every conversation could be layered with hidden meaning. Paris Hilton, who had first-hand exposure to these social dynamics, described it as a place where social hierarchies were unspoken but rigidly enforced, and where influence was a currency far more powerful than money. For those unfamiliar with the island's layout, imagine a secluded paradise designed for maximum privacy and discretion. Expansive beaches, luxury villas, and private amenities created an atmosphere of indulgence. But beneath this veneer of leisure was a network of rules and expectations, subtle signals that determined who was respected, who was observed, and who could be trusted. Paris's account emphasizes that Meghan Markle, though primarily known as a public figure, was not outside these dynamics. She was within them, and her actions and presence were noted by those who understood the unspoken codes of the island. The psychology of the environment is crucial. Epstein Island functioned as a microcosm of elite society, magnified and intensified. Guests were carefully selected, and interactions were monitored, whether overtly or subtly. This is where the power of observation comes into play. Every gesture, every word, every moment of attention or disregard had significance. Paris Hilton noted that those who visited the island quickly learned to navigate its delicate ecosystem. Who to engage with, when to speak, when to remain silent, and how to maintain appearances while assessing opportunities. Now, consider Meghan Markle entering this world. To the public, she was a beloved actress and soon-to-be duchess, a figure whose life was already under intense scrutiny. But on the island, titles and fame were just one layer of identity. Paris observed that Meghan's demeanor, her interactions, and her attentiveness to the environment suggested a heightened awareness of the stakes involved. She was not merely attending as an observer. She was present in a space where every move had meaning, and every connection could shift perceptions, influence power dynamics, and potentially open doors or create obstacles. Paris also highlighted the complexity of social networks on the island. Epstein's guests were not random. They were carefully selected based on influence, wealth, connections, and potential utility. In this environment, presence alone was significant. Being observed, being acknowledged, being noticed, these were markers of status and power. Meghan Markle's interactions, according to Paris, indicated an understanding of this ecosystem. She engaged selectively, observed carefully, and responded in ways that suggested a consciousness of the subtle but potent forces at play. There were also moments Paris described that were deeply unsettling. She spoke of conversations and behaviors that, while outwardly mundane, carried undertones of control, manipulation, and hidden agendas. Epstein Island, in her words, operated like a pressure cooker, an environment designed to test boundaries, observe reactions, and exert influence over those within it. Guests quickly realized that nothing was coincidental, and every gesture or word could have lasting implications. For someone like Meghan Markle, whose public image was meticulously managed, navigating this world would require an acute awareness of both optics and hidden signals. To add to the complexity, the island functioned as a stage where power dynamics were both subtle and overt. Those in positions of influence could test, observe, and manipulate, while others had to read between the lines to understand their place in the hierarchy. Paris explained that Meghan's presence did not go unnoticed. Certain individuals observed her attentively, gauging her reactions, noting her awareness, and assessing her potential role within these elite circles. Paris's observations suggest that Meghan was both aware of being observed and capable of navigating the scrutiny with composure and strategic engagement. It's also important to consider the psychological impact of the environment on guests. Isolation, exclusivity, and the intensity of the social hierarchy created a pressure cooker atmosphere where behavior was amplified and every decision carried weight. Paris described moments of tension and unease, instances where the stakes of social interaction felt almost suffocating. And Meghan, according to Paris, managed to maintain composure while engaging with the complex web of influence, signaling an awareness and adaptability that few outsiders would anticipate. Another crucial element Paris highlighted was the role of observation itself. On Epstein Island, watching and being watched was a fundamental part of the ecosystem. Attention was a form of currency, and the ability to read subtle cues determined one's status and potential leverage. Meghan Markle, Paris suggested, demonstrated a keen sensitivity to these dynamics. She noted who held influence, how interactions unfolded, and when opportunities or risks presented themselves. This awareness, while subtle, set Meghan apart from casual observers and suggested a level of engagement that went beyond mere socializing. But what truly makes the story compelling is the implication of participation. According to Paris, Meghan's awareness, composure, and selective engagement hinted at more than casual observation. It suggested involvement, an understanding of how to navigate, influence, and maintain agency within a high-stakes environment. This is where the narrative begins to diverge sharply from public perception. Meghan is no longer just a celebrated public figure. She is someone operating within a microcosm of power, influence, and secrecy, where her actions, awareness, and choices could have far-reaching consequences. And just as the audience begins to absorb the weight of this environment, Paris drops the suggestion of interactions that were more significant than casual conversations or introductions. There were moments, subtle but telling, where Meghan's presence and responses drew attention, elicited reactions, and positioned her within a complex social hierarchy that few could fully navigate. The implication is clear. Meghan's experience on Epstein Island was not incidental. It was consequential, layered, and observed. The tension in Paris's account builds as she hints at moments of quiet observation, private exchanges, and interactions that were never meant to be public. The environment was controlled, yes, but within that control, power was exercised in subtle ways, and awareness of the stakes became a form of survival. Meghan Markle, according to Paris, demonstrated an ability to read these nuances, engage strategically, and maintain a composure that kept her both visible and discreet. And just when it seems that the complexity of the island's social dynamics is fully grasped, Paris teases the most shocking elements. Interactions and observations that will challenge the audience's assumptions about Meghan Markle. The stage is set for revelations that go beyond public image, beyond speculation, and into the realm of hidden truths that few have ever glimpsed. But what came next? The encounters, the private dynamics, the silent calculations, would reveal a side of Epstein Island and Meghan Markle's role within it that no one could have anticipated. Paris Hilton's account continues to unravel the hidden layers of Epstein Island, offering insights that most people could never imagine. She described the island not just as a physical location, but as a social ecosystem, a place meticulously designed to cultivate influence, test boundaries, and observe behavior. Every guest's presence was significant. Every interaction mattered. Every glance and gesture could shift the delicate balance of attention and power. And according to Paris, Meghan Markle's presence on the island did not go unnoticed. Paris recounted specific moments, small, almost imperceptible gestures that reveal the inner workings of this elite world. The way Meghan entered rooms, the timing of her responses, the subtle signals she sent and received, all of these details suggested an acute awareness of her environment. Paris emphasized that Meghan wasn't merely walking through the island as a casual visitor. She was observing, analyzing, and interacting with a sophistication that drew attention from those attuned to power dynamics. One particularly chilling element Paris highlighted was the culture of observation that permeated Epstein Island. Guests were constantly aware that they were being watched, both by the host and by each other. Influence and status were measured not just by wealth or celebrity, but by how one navigated this delicate ecosystem. According to Paris, Meghan seemed to understand these unspoken rules intuitively. She knew when to engage, when to step back, and when to speak, an awareness that indicated more than surface-level participation. Paris also described moments of tension, where the stakes of social interactions became almost palpable. Epstein Island was not a casual social gathering. It was a high-pressure environment where relationships, reputations, and potential opportunities were in constant flux. Guests learned quickly that every interaction could have consequences, and Meghan's ability to maintain composure while navigating these dynamics was notable. Paris suggested that Meghan's behavior demonstrated both confidence and awareness, traits that set her apart from others who may have been intimidated or overwhelmed. The network of people on Epstein Island adds another layer to this story. These were not random individuals. They were people of influence, power, and often notoriety. Each person operated within a system of hierarchy and subtle control. Paris indicated that Meghan's interactions with these individuals were carefully measured. She engaged selectively, observed keenly, and responded in ways that indicated both understanding and strategic awareness. It wasn't just who Meghan knew. It was how she positioned herself within this network, and how she navigated its complexities with caution and insight. What makes these observations particularly striking is the implication of involvement. According to Paris, Meghan was not merely present. She was participating, aware, and, in some cases, influential. This does not necessarily suggest wrongdoing, but it does suggest agency and engagement in a space where power, secrecy, and influence converge. The island was a controlled environment, yet Meghan's presence indicated that she was neither naive nor passive. She was a participant in a world where perception and awareness were critical. Paris also noted the psychological effects of the island's environment. Isolation, exclusivity, and intensity created pressure, magnifying behaviors and reactions. In this environment, subtle cues carried enormous weight, and every action was observed and interpreted. Meghan's ability to navigate these pressures with composure, according to Paris, suggests a level of sophistication that is rarely acknowledged in public narratives. She was aware of the stakes, capable of reading signals, and able to maintain a presence that commanded attention without attracting undue scrutiny. Adding to the intrigue are the hints Paris dropped regarding interactions that were more than casual. She described private moments, fleeting exchanges, and subtle acknowledgments that indicated Meghan's awareness of her surroundings. These moments, while never fully detailed, suggest a level of engagement with the island's social dynamics that goes beyond the surface. Meghan's presence was consequential, her actions observed, and her awareness noted, elements that elevate the narrative from simple attendance to strategic participation. Furthermore, Paris emphasized the duality of perception versus reality. To outsiders, the island may have appeared as a luxury retreat or social hotspot. But beneath the surface, it operated as a microcosm of power and influence, where every gesture, conversation, and interaction carried meaning. Meghan Markle's ability to navigate this duality, maintaining composure while understanding the underlying dynamics, paints a portrait of someone operating with awareness, intelligence, and adaptability. The tension between public perception and private reality is central here. Meghan's public persona, cultivated over years of media appearances and royal duties, suggests innocence, compassion, and moral clarity. Paris's account, however, hints at a private reality where awareness, strategy, and observation were critical to survival and influence. This contrast raises uncomfortable questions. How much of what we see is curated? How much is performed? And to what extent did Meghan's actions on the island shape her understanding of elite networks and power dynamics? Finally, Paris teased the audience with the most dramatic suggestion. The interactions and awareness she observed were just the beginning. Meghan's presence, engagement, and comprehension of the island's dynamics set the stage for revelations that would shock the public, disrupt existing narratives, and force a reconsideration of what we thought we knew about her. The implications of these untold stories extend beyond simple gossip. They touch on influence, agency, and participation in spaces that are both exclusive and morally complex. But what happened next? The private dynamics, the strategic observations, the silent calculations, would expose a side of Epstein Island and of Meghan Markle that no one outside these circles could have predicted. Every story about power, influence, and hidden networks has its cast of characters. Those who observe, those who guide, and those who subtly manipulate outcomes without ever stepping into the spotlight. Epstein Island was no different. Beneath the luxury, the beaches, and the curated social interactions, there existed a web of individuals whose eyes and intentions shaped the dynamics of everyone present. And according to Paris Hilton, Meghan Markle was not just another guest in this ecosystem. She was being watched, evaluated, and subtly influenced by some of the most powerful figures in the room. To understand this, it's important to grasp the hierarchy that Paris described. Epstein Island operated like a microcosm of elite society. People with wealth, power, and connections at the top, emerging talent or status seekers in the middle, and those whose roles were largely performative or observational at the periphery. Meghan's position was complex. Publicly, she was already on the cusp of fame, but privately, in these exclusive circles, she was still navigating her place, learning the rules, and figuring out how to operate without missteps. And the people who watched her were masters at reading the unspoken codes of behavior. Paris recalled moments where Meghan's interactions drew subtle but deliberate attention. Certain key figures would observe her body language, the tone of her speech, and her reactions in ways that were almost imperceptible to an outsider. These individuals were not passive spectators, they were active evaluators. Paris suggested that their observations weren't casual. They were measuring Meghan's potential, her awareness, and her ability to navigate a world where influence was both currency and weapon. One of the most striking aspects of Paris's account is the psychological layer these observers added to the environment. It wasn't just that Meghan was being watched. It was that her every move had implicit stakes. A compliment, a misstep, or a subtle hesitation could be interpreted as strength, weakness, or opportunity. Paris described the tension this created. How some guests, particularly those familiar with the inner workings of these elite networks, could feel both scrutiny and pressure simultaneously. For Meghan, this meant navigating not just social interactions, but a high-stakes assessment of character and strategy. Paris highlighted specific individuals who wielded influence in these spaces. While she didn't name everyone explicitly, she described the types of figures present. Socialites whose connections spanned continents, financiers whose decisions shaped industries, and insiders whose ability to manipulate perception was almost surgical. These key figures were experts at subtle control, and Meghan, according to Paris, was very much aware of their presence and influence. She engaged with them selectively, listened carefully, and responded in ways that suggested both caution and calculated positioning. Consider this analogy. Imagine a chessboard where every move is observed by masters of the game. Every gesture, every smile, every word is a potential signal, a calculated play, or a risk. Meghan Markle, as Paris described, was learning to move across this chessboard. She was not naive. She was alert, assessing, and at times, strategically responsive. The observers, these key figures, were not merely noting her presence. They were subtly testing her, measuring her awareness, and anticipating how she might operate in high-stakes social and professional environments. Paris also described the emotional impact of these dynamics. Being watched and evaluated in such a meticulous way creates pressure that is difficult to comprehend from the outside. There is an inherent psychological tension, the desire to fit in, the awareness of potential scrutiny, and the recognition that perception often outweighs reality. Meghan, according to Paris, managed these pressures with composure, a sign that she was not only socially aware, but capable of functioning effectively in environments most would find intimidating or overwhelming. Another critical point Paris made is the dual nature of influence. Some of the key figures were not merely observing. They were actively shaping interactions. Through subtle cues, selective attention, and strategic engagement, they could guide conversations, frame perceptions, and even influence decisions without overtly intervening. Paris hinted that Meghan was exposed to this kind of subtle influence and, in turn, navigated it with awareness. This adds a layer of complexity to her presence on the island. She was both observed and participating, both influenced and influencing, in a delicate social ecosystem governed by unspoken rules. Paris emphasized that these dynamics were never explicitly discussed. There were no overt instructions, no visible hierarchies announced. Everything was subtle, nuanced, and almost invisible to those not attuned to the environment. The tension, the observations, and the influences operated beneath the surface, creating a social landscape that required intelligence, composure, and strategic awareness to navigate successfully. Meghan Markle, in Paris's account, demonstrated an ability to understand and operate within this landscape. Finally, Paris teased that some of these observers were not just passive evaluators. They were individuals whose agendas and power extended far beyond the island. Their influence could shape careers, reputations, and even opportunities in the broader world. Meghan's interactions with these figures were not casual. They had implications. The observers were watching not only for immediate social cues, but also for longer-term potential, assessing how someone like Meghan could operate in elite circles outside the island as well.